Welcome to Laguna Podcast, an attempt at illustrating the lives and stories from the Texas outdoors. Today I sit down with a man whose stories failed to match his humility, known for photography at an international level and redfish at a local level. This is my conversation with Tom Pennington. All right, well then let's get rock and rolling. So I got Mr. Tom Pennington in the chair, and this is a really cool episode. And I say that about a lot of them, and I think that the context behind this episode is very important. So I had actually asked Chris Fowler on who to interview for one of the episodes in season 2, and your name was the first one that came up. And he explained to me why, and I'm not going to give anything away because obviously we have all the time in the world to do that. But with that being said, I'm excited to have you on. And if you want to give kind of a brief overview of who you are and what kind of brings you here, then we'll get started with like the regular questions.
Sure. First off, it's an honor to be here. And I was shocked when you reached out and said, hey, I'd like to get together and have a chat and put together a podcast. It was like, I'm just a guy who spent a lot of years behind the camera in the shadows with nobody knowing, people knew who I was in the editorial photo space. I was very well known in that regard. But as far as guiding and being a captain, I'm kind of the new guy to the game, which is totally cool. I'm not new to Port A. I've been coming down here since college, and I'm an old guy now. Turned 50 this year, so long time.
Yeah, heard.
But yeah, it's great to be here.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited to do this, man. So run me through your first memory in the outdoors, and then kind of bring me through, I guess, since you were more in photography and then, started getting into this side of the industry of fly fishing. Before I finish the question, the chronological order, I think, would be important. So run me through the chronological order of like a brief overview of photography, fly fishing, and how they all kind of culminate together.
Sure. So what do you want me to start with? Like my first memory of the outdoors?
And then we'll just kind of run that way.
I grew up in a family where we were always outside. I remember like my dad taking me bass fishing since I could even have memories. Like that's what we did. Mm-hmm. If the weather was good on the weekend, we were on the water. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely what we did, and I was rabid about it. And amazing memories of doing that. My saltwater exposure, that didn't come about until very, very early college. Mm-hmm. And that actually happened. I ended up coming down for a fly fishing trip with some friends and coworkers, and we didn't have a boat, we didn't have a guide, we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, and we just took off on foot and fished some of the standard places here, and it just left such a impact on me that like I have to do this one way or another, and been obsessed with it ever since.
Now, before we get to how you got into photography, rewind a little bit. How old are you when you kind of got into the actual fly fishing side of this like passion of yours? Sure.
So my first memory of a fly rod came about a buddy of mine in the neighborhood.
Yeah, we'll cut that out. Don't worry.
Buddy of mine in the neighborhood that he was a year older than me, but we always ran around together in the woods fishing and hitting friends' farm ponds and things like that. He showed up with this fiberglass fly rod. I was like, man, what's that? He's like, oh, it's a fly rod. I was like, oh, you going to Colorado? He's like, no, we're going to do that here. I was like, we took it out and caught some bass and panfish and waded some creeks right around where we lived. I was like, man, I got to get one of these. I don't know, scrounged up $20-$30 and bought this little fiberglass kit. And then that was before we ever had driver's licenses.
Wow.
And then in high school, there was in Fort Worth, now defunct fly shop and outdoor shop that I went to work at. And they had a huge fly department. And that was like very eye-opening to have some of the absolute giants in the industry roll through.
This episode is made possible by our friends over at Gordy & Sons Outfitters, located in Houston, Texas, and employing a team of experienced outdoorsmen specializing in fly fishing, hunting, and wing shooting. Gordy & Sons is sure to prepare you for success in the outdoors. Next time you find yourself prepping for a weekend getaway or a bucket list trip, be sure to give them a shout.
Through there. Like I remember in high school, Lefty Fray came in.
No kidding.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was like unbelievable. And we had these had a TV in the back of the fly shop that ran VHS tapes all the time, and seeing all this all this saltwater fly fishing and bonefish and magical waters. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta figure this out. I gotta go do this. And then, the photography obsession came about in high school.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was all kind of intertwined. My initial photography interest did not spawn out of fishing. It actually spawned out of rock climbing.
Oh, no kidding.
Me and the same buddies who had the fly rod initially, we were doing a lot of rock climbing. And we were going on these trips up to Oklahoma and various places around Texas Hill Country. And we wanted some photos of the trips. And this was long before cell phones and no digital cameras. So I saved up my money and went and bought a little Canon film camera. And then out of that, got involved with the high school yearbook and high school newspaper. And then one day in class, the teacher stopped me and she's like, Tom, like people make a living doing this. Like you should really think about this. I was like, well, like I know there's photos in newspapers and magazines, but I didn't grow up in a media family. Like I don't know how this works. And she's like, let me put you in touch with some people at a couple universities. And then that just opened up some amazing opportunities.
And some of the, you mentioned you've worked with, again, you haven't mentioned yet, but you told me off air that you got to work with one of the, if not the most prestigious kind of organization for like photography in regards to just like not public domain, but like things that people would see every day. And we'll get into that. What other things have you, or companies have you worked for that are quite notable that people may know?
So I'm straight out of college. I got hired as a staff photographer at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And that was back in the day when newspapers were big.
Yeah.
Like when I got hired, I was number 32. We had 32 staff photographers for one newspaper. It was incredible. The places we went, the stuff we covered, and our parent company at the time was the second largest chain of newspapers in the entire country. So I would get turned over to go work for corporate and cover major stories, border issues, 9/11. I went to New York for a couple weeks.
How long after the attacks were you at the site?
It took us 22 hours, and we left because we had to drive. I say we, a team of reporters and photographers, we drove from Texas to Manhattan, and we got there on the 12th.
Because they weren't taking any flights in anymore, right? Yeah, I think they shut everything down,
no
right?
Trains,
yeah,
everything was shut down.
Wow.
The only way to get there was to drive. So I spent 2 weeks there covering that story. Then the parent company of the newspaper I worked for, they started putting together a team to go to Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I immediately put my name in the hat for that. And management came back and said, no, we're not taking any young guys. We only want photographers that have prior conflict experience. And there was a photographer at the newspaper I worked at. Like, he's been a mentor of mine my entire career. And still a wonderful best friend today. They wanted him to go, but he was credentialed to cover the Salt Lake Olympics, which were happening that year. And he told them, no way, I'm not going to Afghanistan, getting stuck there for the winter. Let Pennington go. and they trusted him enough that they said, yeah, okay, we'll give him a chance.
You want to say who that mentor was?
Ron Jenkins.
Okay.
Yeah, he's one of the best guys you'll ever meet in your life. Yeah, and he had gone to Haiti in the early '90s and covered the coup down there. And he had a real track record of getting in and out of some really nasty spots in the world, but he didn't want to go to Pakistan or Afghanistan, so I got called up.
So he basically puts your name in the ring. You get called into Pakistan first. Run me through that whole experience.
Yeah, so I ended up leaving the States November 2001 and flew commercially to Islamabad, Pakistan, and then on to Quetta, which is southern town, border town, closest town to Kandahar that you can get on the Pakistan side. And then from there, met up with some other coworkers, and we arranged to get smuggled into Kandahar in early December 2001.
Was that process sketchy by any means?
Extremely sketchy. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to run into details about that?
No, it all worked out really well, but it was just, it could have gone the other way so many times. I always say I've had a lifetime of close calls.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, I had some very dear friends and colleagues that didn't make it back. And that's just the reality of conflict work.
Yeah. I mean, you can argue that they knew what they were getting themselves into, but
absolutely.
It's like, it's still a lot.
100%. To be very clear, I went solely at my will. The company I worked for never, coerced us into going. I wanted to go. It was a type of work I always wanted to do.
Do you have any images that you could still think of right now that you have taken, or at least in Pakistan, because we'll get to Afghanistan in a minute, but in Pakistan that you look back on semi-fondly, or images that you're mostly proud of is a better way to put it?
The Pakistan work, it was so brief because we spent most of our time arranging to get smuggled into southern Afghanistan. So I don't have a huge body of work in Pakistan. In Afghanistan over the years, and not just the initial trip in 2001, but I went back in 2005 and 2006. There's stuff there that it'll be forever burned in my brain.
Cool,
for sure.
And I'm sure we can talk about that here in a minute. But so you were in Pakistan for how long?
I would have to go back and look at the exact timeline, but it was literally under 2 weeks.
I figured. Yeah,
we
just
brief. Hit the ground, and I got into Pakistan at a time when, Kandahar was going to fall, and I had coworkers that they had been in Pakistan for 2 months. They went in right after 9/11. Once we figured out Al Qaeda had been involved in this,
and everyone was waiting for the fall of Kandahar.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then so from that point forward, it took you how long to get into Afghanistan? Or at least get called into, or at least start to formulate a plan to get in?
We were formulating the plan the instant we hit Pakistan.
Really?
Yeah, just trying to figure out, okay, who is getting in and out of there? Are goods flowing in and out? And who are the traders that are running goods between the Pakistan border and Kandahar, and what's the situation in Kandahar? And then you had some official words come out that Kandahar had fallen, and Mullah Omar couldn't be found, and anyway, it took a couple weeks. But then once we got word, it was a matter of kind of 2 days where we went to the border and met some smugglers, and they had told us, hey, we're going today. And then they changed their mind. It was a very, very tense kind of situation where literally we're like, let's go. And they're like, no, the situation's bad. They're all on walkie-talkies and satellite phones, and you're just second guessing the whole time. Are these guys to be trusted? And you kind of, you really gauge your translator's trust of the situation. In the end, we went back to the hotel in Pakistan. We went back to the border the next day, and everything opened up that day. We were with some other photographers. Their translator said, yes, let's go. And literally it was chaotic. My translators refused to go. They said, no, it's not safe. So we jumped in the truck with some other photographers and just told our translators, like, I'll call you later on the sat phone
call you if I need you.
And send in, supplies and gear that we might need. So it was, yeah.
One of the things you told me that was interesting about translators was that they were actually mostly or typically med students.
Very often so, because they have English education because of the medical text and just how their schooling was shaped.
Wow. Well, okay, so if you can kind of run me through a little bit of you spent a much better time in Afghanistan, not better, but you spent a longer time in Afghanistan. I would like to talk a little about that, and then we'll start diverging into more like fishing oriented stuff.
Sure. Yeah, like on that initial trip to Afghanistan, we traveled all over the South and all the way to Kabul eventually. I came home from that trip after 4 months and then started putting together a plan to go to Iraq, and ended up securing a visa to Iran and flew to Iran. I'm totally leaving out like a lifetime of details on this because we just don't have enough time. But
no worries.
The short version is I got into northern Iraq via Iran and was in Sulaymaniyah with the Kurds and did the fall of Iraq from the north, then on to Kirkuk, and then Saddam's hometown of Tikrit, and then all the way to Baghdad. Wow. And that trip was 4 months long.
Jesus.
Exited out of there, and then came home for a few months, and then went back the following December for 2 months, and left and said, I'll never go back there.
What made you say that?
It was just, I'd lost my edge there. The situation had gotten really, really dire. This was right around the time the contractors were strung up on the bridge in Fallujah, and before the big Battle of Fallujah. But it just wasn't an environment I needed to be in anymore.
Yeah.
And I still to this day haven't been back.
I mean, I can see why.
Yeah.
And then so let's move over to a little bit of fishing, and I have some questions that I'll ask later on towards the end about some other stuff there. Guiding. So you get back from shooting and stuff like that. You mentioned to me that the actual decision to go full-time guiding was a long one and a drawn out one. Do you want to kind of get into what that was like?
Sure. It was that, like, we're cutting out like 20 years worth of photo career.
I mean, I figured we'd do a little bit of fishing, then we'll bounce back into photography.
Absolutely. So I spent the last 10 years of my photo career on staff with the sport division at Getty Images, major international photo agency, and covered sporting events all across the globe. Pretty much if there's a major sporting event that you list off, there's a very good chance I've been there. There's a few that, like, I never did Wimbledon, but
You did French Open?
I've not done French Open. I've very, very little tennis.
Okay.
Yeah. But golf majors, countless Super Bowls, World Series, NBA finals, Stanley Cup finals, countless Olympics, and everything in between. In the summertime, I specialized in Olympic swimming. So I was fortunate enough to cover Michael Phelps and the tail end of his career wrapping up in Rio.
Wow.
And then in the winter realm, I really specialized in alpine skiing and freestyle skiing events, covering Lindsey Vaughn, who's now making a comeback, which is pretty exciting to watch. See her ski this winter.
Come back from what? What kind of injury?
She retired.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she retired, but she's coming back and slated to compete this year. And then covered most of Michaela Schifrin's career, which is, phenomenal to get to document that. Yeah.
And then, okay, so we mentioned a little bit of the Getty stuff, and I will ask more stuff about that, because I think that alone is so rich in information. But you mentioned that the decision to quit Getty, and I'm sure that a lot of photographers listening to this also would be like, yo, like, what are you doing? But you mentioned it was a tough decision.
There were a lot of people in the industry that thought I'd lost my mind. Like some of my best friends in the industry, like one, in fact, he just told me, he's like, Tom, like you can't quit. He's like, yeah, I'm just in a place where I need to do something different. And it was a decision that my wife and I, really put the pieces together for several years to lay the groundwork to make it happen. And then when we told our son, who was 11 or 12 at the time, he just looked at me and he's like, yeah, Dad, like, why would you want to go to another Olympics? You know what? Like, you're gone all the time. Like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. You'll be around way more. And like, I only get one shot at being a dad.
Yeah, fair.
And he's 13 now, and those teenage years are tough enough. And he didn't need me being on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
For a month or more at a time. He needs me being around.
And the guiding prospect, was that something that you had juggled in while you were also shooting for the decades prior, or like what point was it when you were like, hey, I could use this, I could do this?
That's a great question. So it was really nothing that crossed my mind at the pinnacle of my photo career. So I have this trait where I go all in on everything I do. And I was so narrowly focused to be able to operate and compete photographically at the level I was working at. I didn't have time to have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, I was all in. When it came to photo work, I was all in. The guide aspect, that went all the way back to high school, working in a fly shop in Fort Worth, and just thinking, man, I want to be on the water, catching fish. And, at that time, I had no concept of what it really takes and the people skills it takes to put people on the water. You're when you're working, you're providing an experience. You're not just out hanging out with your buddies where you can goof off and blow shots at fish. Like, you're really, I want to provide the richest experience I can for anyone that's on my skiff.
Yeah.
And I don't take that obligation and duty lightly at all. But circling back, I always thought in high school and early college, hey, if this photo thing doesn't work out, that would be cool. I'd love to be a guide. And then when my wife and I got down to brass tacks about me transitioning careers, she's like, what do you want to do? Like, what an opportunity to pick anything in the world you want to do. Like, I want to go chase redfish and any other salty fish.
Yeah.
I want to be on the water. So here we are.
Now, while you were traveling for your photography, were you able to like get away and fish and stuff too, or were you like one of those people who like you've got off the job and you're still wired in on the job?
Right. So unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to take advantage of as many places as I've been and fish. And a lot of it was because I wasn't working in cool tropical locations, but I've worked in 50 different countries. So I've been a couple of places, But like one year I was in Hawaii 8 different times. And did I fish while I was there? No, because I was working.
Yeah.
Even though like covering golf tournaments, and there's a particular country club in Honolulu that has stellar bone fishing right off the 16th hole. It's just right there. And a lot of the golfers on practice rounds, they're like, "Hey, Tom, we're going fishing after this round." I was like, man, I've got a whole list of other golfers I've got to go photograph for the afternoon. Otherwise, I'd love to be there. And it's one of those things, but I'll go do that now.
I mean, I'd hope so.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I like to ask a lot of people, especially just because I like to get a gauge of how people perceive the industry or for said industry, leaving the world of photography and, kind of essentially taking in this whole industry of fly fishing at a professional level. What are some things that you see in the fly fishing industry that kind of not upset you, but you wish would change?
Ooh, I don't know. That's kind of a heavy one.
It's okay to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I try to be very open-minded and know that everybody has different perspectives based on where they've been, what they've done.
Because like one of the things that you and I had mentioned off air was how, and I think you'll kind of agree here, but I don't want to just give like a broad generalization, but was like everyone gives stuff away for free in terms of content and media marketing, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, definitely in the photo business side of the industry, and it's not just in the fly fishing realm. It's across all industries now. Companies don't have to have as big a marketing budget for visuals as they used to because they have a steady stream of users providing social media content to them. Yes, they still have to pay for like major catalog campaigns, photo campaigns, print campaigns, and slick ads. But just to feed the social media machine daily, I do it. I tag the companies who support me in my fly fishing business. I tag them on my social media post.
Yeah, but that's like a contract essentially, right? So it's a little different.
Yeah, but like used to, companies had to pay for visuals.
Yeah.
And they get a lot of visual content for free.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I brought it up. And it's funny, Lance Kruger and I actually went over the exact same topic.
Yeah.
One of the things that he actually had, one of the pet peeves he has is copyright and stuff like that because of how easy it is for your images to get stolen and stuff like that.
Oh, it's so easy now.
Yeah, so actually, this is a good one. I've always told myself I was remember this, but there's a guy out of Sal Padre named Ryan Diaz, and I hope he's listening to this. He's actually involved in the book as well. He took some of the underwater images right after Michaela's spread, and he mentioned to me also that he could stop posting so much because people were stealing his images.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I said, man, you're taking great images. You could grow this. You could do something with this. And here he was hindered by essentially the double-edged sword that could also allow him to be big in the space, if you will.
That's right. It's a total double-edged sword where like you have to feed the machine.
Yeah.
To get the imagery out there to create your photographic brand and show people what you can do visually. But you also, if you want to be a photographer, a professional photographer, and pay your bills doing it, you have to sell images.
Yeah.
You have to sell licensing rights to imagery, and videos the same way. And so the challenge is to find clients that still understand and value that and will pay market value for those images.
It's just tough to gauge what market value really is, right? So therein lies another problem. It is tough. It is so tough. But I wanted to ask also about your photography within the fishing industry, because I mean, you've put out some videos and like a couple of images of tailing redfish that I was blown away by. And I wanted to see if that was something that you always intended to do, or that was one of the things where it's like, hey, like I'm guiding, but I don't want to stop doing something that I also love.
Right. So my goal, there were really two reasons for it. One, I still love photography.
Yeah.
And like I will probably always have a camera in some form or fashion in my hand, because I like my brain, it just thinks in a photographic way. And I love being on the water. I love watching redfish do redfish things. I love seeing Jack Crevalle do Jack Crevalle things. And the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And to be able to take some of my photographic expertise and the skill set I have with underwater work and combine that with what I know about fish, to blend those two together and then use that to build my brand as a guide.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Is there anybody in the fishing industry that you kind of take inspiration from, or at least like look up to for, like, not look up to, but essentially kind of like have a pseudo competitive thing where it's like, man, this guy's doing cool stuff. I want to kind of, compete with these kind of individuals?
Absolutely. It kind of put me on the spot. And I would hate to call out any, two or three specifically, but there's some real heavy hitters doing some amazing work out there. And there's a huge talent pool doing top tier work. The difference is to separate yourself from the top tier to the absolute elite exceptional work out there.
What do you think it takes to kind of essentially bridge that gap and be so, I guess, not notorious, but like so well known in the space?
I don't know. I think it takes some luck. I think it takes a lot of networking.
Yeah.
And it takes some brands being willing to take a chance on you. Some of the bigger brands, to put your work out there. It's, like you mentioned earlier, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You can have the best work in the world, but if no one's seeing it, like, does it really exist? So it also takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to be on the water, to find the kind of fish we need to photograph, because it takes certain happy fish. We don't just go out and shoot these gorgeous pods of tailing reds
every single day.
I wish we did. But it takes being with the right people on the skiff when we find those fish, and having everyone understand we're not going to throw a fly into that pod the instant we see it. Yeah. We're going to shoot some video of it, or we're going to shoot some photos of it. And we're going to slow down our day to be able to do that. And then, I'm very, very fortunate that I've got a great crew that I fish with when I don't have clients.
I was actually about to ask if there was people that you actually can think of that you prefer to shoot with.
Absolutely. I've got a very tight-knit group that I trust them to the end of the earth. They're always so patient and willing to slow down. And if I say, hey, let's throw the drone up, they're like, absolutely. We've all caught thousands of fish. Yeah. Let's go do something a little bit different. Or, I can text a buddy of mine and be like, hey, the winds have worked out the right way for the last few days. I think we can find some really clear water, which we have to have for underwater work. You can't shoot underwater fish in cloudy water. You have to have some really clear water. And I'll be like, let's go out, let's hook a couple fish, and then let's go shoot fish underwater. And he's like, absolutely, let's do it. And he's as patient as you could ever ask for. And then got other people that they're always game to not cast the fly rod yet.
If you want to give credit where credit is due, and feel free, like, It's up to you. I don't really. I was like doing that, but
Yeah. So Will Cheshire with Cavemen Outdoors, he's a real visual guy himself. And then my friends Matt and Sarah, they're always willing to get on the boat and go, like do whatever we need to do to capture whatever I'm feeling, like doing that day. Got another great captain that lives in Rockport, James. He's always game. Like, yeah, man, pick up the camera, do whatever. And then there's others. But
yeah. No, I get it. I'm putting you on the spot.
yeah, for sure.
Now, one of the things I have a question of is in regards to underwater photography, and I don't do much of it anymore because obviously I mentioned to you earlier, like I stick to my mirrorless setup, and I don't have an underwater housing for anything but the 90D. But one of the issues that I've always gotten into was dealing with stilt coming up when I was doing underwater images, because I mean the water we fish, it's not like we're fishing on hard sand 24/7.
I wish we were.
I know, and even then it still gets a little turbid. What are some like tactics or strategies that you use to kind of like offset that?
You have to really slow down.
Yeah.
And when I get in the water, I have to be very careful how I'm moving around, because every movement I make kicks up silt. And as soon as we silt up an area, we've burned it.
Yeah, we can't do anything with it.
Can't do anything with it. So we'll work an area. We try to find as hard a bottom as we can. But I shoot fish over a lot of our healthy seagrass a lot. And even that has a lot of sediment silt sitting on it. So every move you make, every move the fish makes through it, kicks up and clouds up the water. And so we'll work an area and then we'll move a little bit, sometimes 10 feet, sometimes 50 feet into an area. And we have to move real slow in how we do it. And we watch which way the silt is drifting and we work the other direction. But you're also having to pay attention to which way the sunlight's coming. Because underwater, you have to have some sunlight.
Yeah,
for it to work.
One of the biggest bummers is you have to have the right conditions. And here's a question that's a little bit not philosophical, but do you think that because of all the checklists that photographers have to essentially check off before they can do images, do you think that there's a lot of images that go like that just aren't taken at all because of photographers being like, oh well, this isn't right, so I can't get in and take this picture, which could have been a great picture?
Are you referencing like in the fly fishing and fish realm?
Yeah.
I think a lot of opportunities get missed because when we hook a fish and we're in an area that has fish, like at the end of the day, we're all anglers and we love fishing. And so the tendency is to photograph the fish topside, get the fish back in the water as fast as possible to keep it healthy, and then move on. And on the skiff, we rotate out positions. And you want to go catch another fish. You want to catch another fish. And then you get in the cycle of, well, let's have a 15 fish day, or hey, let's have a 20
more fish, and then we'll take the camera out.
One more fish. And so I think people don't slow down enough, and it takes a lot of equipment. Like the underwater housing is bulky, and it takes an immense amount of technical proficiency to not just have that underwater housing, but know how to use it.
Yeah. Not to mention, you also have to have a good amount of money just to buy an underwater housing. They're not exactly cheap.
It's very expensive.
Yeah. I don't even want to think about underwater housing because I don't have one for my mirrorless camera. But one of the reasons I had asked that is because like part of me sometimes I'll look at an image and I wonder how staged it was, and sometimes it kind of takes me out of appreciating an image too much. I want to know, maybe that happens to you, or where do you when you look at images like that? So
when I look at underwater fish images, they're all produced. Like no one is tiptoeing right up to this gorgeous trophy fish. and snapping a photo of it. Let's be very clear about that. When I look at a lot of imagery, I look at it in the context of, is this a composite? Was this shot like where they had the underwater fish photo and then they shoot the angler topside or whatever, and then they've combined the two images?
That's what I meant. When they look a little too, yeah.
Yeah. Because from a technical standpoint, it is incredibly technically difficult with our water clarity to shoot a fish underwater and expose that properly and then get the angler topside exposed. And there are some people doing it, without a doubt. And you can tell when it's legit. You can tell when it's been done in Photoshop.
Yeah. It's like, so there's one image I have in mind, and it was an image for bonefish. It was, I forgot what magazine it was, but it's a pretty famous picture, and it's a poling skiff in the back, and I think they're casting at a bonefish. And in the foreground, it's underwater. The bonefish is there, and there's no fly. It almost looks like the fly was edited out. But it was one of those things where it's like, man, I think it's such a cool picture, but it's hard for me to really want to say, damn, that's a cool picture, because you could tell that there was pieces. It was almost like a Lego, like a puzzle that they built versus like a composite, like you were mentioning.
Right. And that happens for advertising campaigns.
Yeah, fair.
Things like that. Elements get added and deleted all the time. Not so much in the editorial, space where there are photo manipulation ethics that are involved, but that's a whole nother animal that doesn't apply for advertising work. That
kind of actually brings us to my next segue, which is, and this might be a little silly one, but I do want to know, do you see AI ruining the future of fly fishing photography?
I don't know. I think it's AI in the photo realm is still in its infancy.
Yeah.
Where you can, end up with somebody with 6 thumbs in an AI generated photo.
Yeah.
So it's not quite there yet, but it could. You type in the elements you want and poof, there it is. I hope it doesn't, but it's still early on. We'll see.
Earlier, you brought up people missing images, and obviously I brought up the question as well. It's funny. Do you have any images in the back of your mind that kind of are notorious for like the image that could have been, like, one that you thought you had, you planned it out perfect, look it in the EVF, and then you looked at it in person, it was out of focus?
Probably. It's. I know there's some underwater fish photos that happens because the focusing as soon as it gets silty is pretty tricky, and it's probably what sticks with me the most is times I've been out fishing and I've seen the most incredible scene, and either I'm up on top of the poling platform and the camera's down in the bottom of the skiff, and knowing if I climb down, like, it's going to be gone.
Yeah.
There are definitely a couple of those out on the water. That could have been, but we just sat there and stared at it like, oh my God, that would have been incredible. Slow-mo video shot 120 frames a second. But it's not, or even it would have been the most incredible still photo. But knowing we were so close to what was happening that there was no way I could get down, get the camera and capture it. Yeah.
Ben Paschal is one of the guys who I think has done really well in regards to being able to capture a lot of those like quick moments. He mentioned a little bit about like reddish egrets when they like flock up in hundreds and are all basically on top of redfish. And then he gave me images of like what was it? Oh, like herons eating stingrays and that is mind blowing to me. Like, to see it is so cool because you could see it in person. It's one of those things where it's like you can explain. I can explain the image to you, but if you see it, there's just a lot more that I feel like you can't explain. Which is, I don't know, which kind of speaks to how rare the actual occurrence can be.
It's so rare. Yeah. And magical what he's capturing.
Yeah, I'm quite a Paschal fan.
Yeah, for sure.
I kind of wanted to talk about the other side of that question though. what are some images that you are most proud of in the fly fishing world?
Some of the tailing fish, they stand out a little bit. And some of the underwater stuff, it's okay. I don't know. Recently, I've been shooting more video, and I've got some video of some slow-mo video of this big school of redfish just crushing shrimp. That it was fun. I got fired up.
I bet
it was cool, and just seeing that process slowed down and captured correctly, and just these shrimp busting and fish devouring them, and then having some seagulls swoop down and grab these shrimp. It's fun stuff.
Yeah. Was there anything that made you want to transition into video?
I think it's just more a technical challenge.
Really?
Yeah. Like a lot of people think photo and video are the same, and they're not. They're so completely different. From a technical side, like, visually framing things, but just the elements you look for. On still photos, you're looking for peak action and reaction, where in video, you want all of that, and it has to be framed properly, and does it flow correctly? So it's allowed me to kind of flex my creative brain a little bit and figure out some technical stuff.
Do you plan to only, like, I understand that, like, you have your Instagram for like the guiding aspect, and you put a lot of your stuff there also. Do you plan to also start traveling and do photography at other locations as well, or is that just strictly for Texas fishing photography?
No, I've got some trips coming up. I'm going to Mexico and then Puerto Rico to fish, and that stuff will definitely be on there. I use it as a platform just to try to put up cool visual stuff. So no, it's not limited to just Texas fishing stuff. Just like my original Instagram account, which was my professional photo account, I post fish stuff on it because that's what I'm shooting day in, day out now.
Do you get people who are fans of the photography that come fish with you just to, like, get a chance to hang out with you?
I have had some friends come down.
I figure, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I bet it's cool to have those worlds collide.
It is. It's fascinating that way. And sometimes it happens, and I don't even know the people were connected in the industry. I had a wonderful father and son on the skiff, and the father, he was asking me, kind of my background, and I explained, what I did, and he starts listing off some names of people in the industry. Turns out we know like 30, 40 of the same people. And he picks up the phone and calls a good mutual friend of ours. And he's like, hey, you'll never guess where I'm at and what I'm doing. And so, like, our mutual friend had no idea that our worlds would ever collide that way.
Yeah.
But he worked for Kodak back in the day on major projects with them, and we knew tons of the same people in the industry from way back.
No, that's cool. I bet those full circle moments like that are always something special.
For sure.
Earlier you mentioned that you had a mentor, someone you looked up to in photography. Is there someone that kind of helped you out while you were figuring out the fishing in the area before you felt so what I'm looking for, like attuned enough to actually start guiding?
Yeah, there's the list is too long to single out people, but yes, I've been fishing down here since early to mid '90s. So, but the fishery's changed immensely.
Going into my next question.
Yeah, it's changed immensely, and it always changes. But I've got a tight group of people that they were always willing. If I didn't have clients booked, we're on the water fishing, and we're watching those changes so that when clients are on the boat, we can go get them.
Yeah. If you had a camera when you were like in your hands when you were first starting to fish in the 90s in the area, and even like when you were just barely starting to feel comfortable in with the fly rod and stuff, is there any images or scenarios that you don't see anymore that you wish you had a chance to photograph?
Some days the density of fish, everybody talks about, we used to see a lot more fish. I say that, and then like some days, like last month we were out and we would see 100+ fish. So we still have very fortunate days here. That being said, like we've had days where we go out and we see 6 fish. We're like, ooh, okay, we got to keep finding them. These fish are not in the same place every single day.
Yeah,
we can try to pattern them, and we have a pretty good grasp on that. But they're still fish.
Yeah, no, I totally get it.
But nothing specifically sticks out from the mid to late 90s and early 2000s that really sticks in my mind.
I kind of want to segue a little bit back, and you mentioned earlier when I was trying to gloss over the photography that I skipped about 2 decades worth of photography. Run me through a little bit of all that, the chronological progression of those 20 years, and I kind of want to ask some stuff about all the stuff we'll get into then.
Sure. So I spent the first 10, 12 years of my career at a large major newspaper. I left that industry in 2008, voluntarily took a buyout, and then began freelancing in the same editorial space, and then went to work on staff with Getty Images shortly thereafter, and spent the last 10, 12 years of my professional career with Getty Images.
And you mentioned the Olympics and a couple other events. I would like to know a little bit about the Olympics in and of itself, what it was like to actually be behind the scenes and see athletes at such a like a level of you and I just talking right here. If you can try to explain the grandiosity of that.
It was a real privilege and honor to like get to document history in that way. The Olympic moments are a very real thing. You have athletes that pour every ounce of their being into performing at the most elite level on a 4-year cycle. They train for 3.5 years to be able to peak right at the Olympics.
Yeah.
And to watch that happen is incredible. It's really something else. And then to see Olympic athletes do it over multiple Olympic games is amazing.
Was there any, and this is I guess an anecdotal question, but did you witness any like heartbreaks at the Olympics that kind of like set, like at least like made an imprint on you as an individual?
You always see some agonizing defeat. Always hated seeing the injuries. That was one byproduct of ski racing, where you would have some, catastrophic injuries, and always hated that. Never liked watching a ski racer crash coming down the mountain. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. I never cared how nice of a photo it would make. I hated it.
Yeah.
Because when you're on the mountain, like what you don't see over TV and what you don't hear over TV is them screaming, agonizing in pain when they wadded up in the A net and B net on a downhill ski course.
Yeah.
Waiting for patrol to get to them.
Did you have a lot of bids on images that you took that were of like that kind of caliber, like incidents and stuff like that?
Not so much.
I mean, I figure that's not the case, right? But
no.
I've always wondered.
Yeah, I've got a few crashes. We all used to always talk about ski racers coming across a jump or a gate like a flying cat, where they're all spread out, out of balance. And I have tons of photos of ski racers just hauling down the mountain, and they get out of balance and come across like a flying cat, but they pull it back in and recover. And it's amazing, when how they do that. What these athletes do is incredible.
Is there one Olympic that you are most proud of that you shot? Winter or summer? Winter or summer?
From a technical standpoint, there was a photo in Korea of Lindsey Vonn skiing. That was her last Olympics. It was a pan shot of her panning through the trees. That one, I was proud of that just because the technical aspect. It was not an approved photo position. It required weeks and weeks on the mountain, like learning the course and finding the right set of trees that I could see her come down the mountain and not just see her ski the course, but have trees between me and her with enough gap, and then where I can pan the camera at 15th or 20th of a second and get her tack sharp when she's doing 80, 90 kilometers down a downhill course. That one, I walked away from Korea happy with that one.
I can see why.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting is that most people, when they're inside the space, when they're inside, I guess, like when they're on the inside looking outside looking in, it's easy for people to kind of get lost with what images they think are good and bad. And then when you kind of get on the inside and you start taking the picture yourself and producing, you start looking at images in a different way. Like you just mentioned, it was a technical point. It was a technical thing that you were proud of, but it wasn't an approved image position, which I assume basically is like a consensus that companies take from like people. They're like, this picture look good or whatever. Or if you want to explain that.
Yeah, sorry. What I meant by an approved photo position within ski racing, we work on the downhill race course. And you have to be positioned where if the ski racer falls, you're not in the line where their momentum and gravity will take them. That's what I mean by like FIS, the governing body of ski racing. We have to be in position an hour before a ski race, and then they approve with the photo marshal and the safety director. They ski down the course and say, yes, you can be here, or no, you can't. You have to move to a different position. And in this position, I shot that particular photo of Lindsay from. It was off course. It was something way out in the woods that I'd scouted. That's what I mean by not an approved photo position.
Okay. I thought it was because you see a lot of images and it's always like when they're coming on the turn on one of the flags, basically parallel to the floor. And then you have like some of the ones that you showed me in the Olympic book downstairs and stuff. Like it's like I've seen the composition before. So I thought maybe that's what they're like, hey, like you can do these and these and these.
No. And there's some certain style, technical style of body position and things like that we strive for with certain sports, but no, it was strictly. It was not on one of the official approved photo positions that I shot that.
I mean, it was way off course. An amazing picture either way.
Yeah, it was fun.
Were you able to actually get on the grounds of the Olympic Village?
In Sochi, we shot some stuff with some athletes. But overall, like the Olympic Village is not a place, where media hangs out at. It's for Olympic athletes.
I mean, I think it's so cool.
Yeah.
We've mentioned a little bit of the Olympics and stuff like that, which in and of itself, I think is a lifetime worth of just experiences as a photographer. But with that being said, I think it'd be cool if maybe you could run me through some moments or some instances that you were a photographer at certain events and not the events in and of themselves.
Sure. There's a whole list of them. Some things off the top of my head that really stand out, like having the opportunity to photograph Tom Brady at the height of his career was spectacular. What he did and was always capable of doing on the field it's stuff legends are made of. What he did against Atlanta in the Super Bowl, unbelievable. And then watching Patrick Mahomes, his career just take off and what he was capable of doing on the field, it's absolutely incredible. Those stand out. There was a day up in the mountains in northern Iraq where we linked up with some U.S. operators, and they ended up pulling out a Barrett 50 cal rifle, and typically that gun's used to neutralize vehicles and aircraft and things like that. But there were some guys lighting us up, shooting at us, and to get to watch this sniper with this 50 cal and with his spotter take care of business was unbelievable.
The gunfire slowly receding and everything like that.
It was a day in the mountains in northern Iraq that I'll always remember.
Does the spotter announce the hit? Like if it's like,
yeah,
wow,
yeah, in detail.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Wow. In fact, I recently posted a photo I shot during that engagement for Veterans Day.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I shared it too. It was an amazing picture.
That one is. It was just one of those moments that it was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I can't. What goes on through your head? You're under fire. Can you explain the thoughts that may have been were you thinking anything?
Yeah, like you just kind of like to be in that environment, you kind of end up in the zone where some days you wake up and you feel totally bulletproof, and then other days you really don't want to get out of bed, and you're just like, hey, this doesn't feel quite right. That particular situation, it was very high adrenaline. There was pretty kinetic battlefield, and they were taking care of it. And like to get to witness that, first and foremost, I have to think about my safety, and am I in a position that's not going to where I can photograph and document history and what's going on, and not become a target and not compromise the people I'm with, soldiers I'm with, because I never ever wanted to bog down the momentum or cause a problem.
Were you given like that information when you landed in a combat area, or was that something you just had to have already known?
It's just something we learned. I don't know. You just learn it.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense. But
it's some of it's situational awareness. Leading up to the invasion of Iraq, I did go to several. They're not full-blown schools. They're like week-long hostile environment training courses with extensive first aid classes and just kind of teaching you what the battlefield will look like and the threats and how the threats work. And then had that one. I went to a second class that was a whole nuclear, biological, chemical weapons training class. That was the whole reason the U.S. was going to Iraq. So we had to have some awareness of what that might look like and how to safely don gas masks, mop suits, and then even more so, not just don it, but if you get caught up in a situation, how do you decontaminate and get out of it and get out of the situation without killing everybody? Then you're contaminated. Fortunately, none of that ever came to pass. But that was a very real threat, we thought, going into it. So I did have some formal training with that. But then a lot of it you just in my line of work, I learned to read people really well and just have that situational awareness where you can tell when the intensity of the battlefield heats up and it becomes very kinetic. And then other times where it's one-sided, you can tell when the heat's getting turned up.
One of the questions I have is, as a photographer, I feel like in that scenario, the ideal scenario would be that you could illustrate both sides of the conflict, correct? Was there any moment where you were actually able to illustrate both sides of the conflict?
I was not, and that's one of the ethical dilemmas of covering conflict. Is it's very rare that one single photographer can cover both sides because you're just rarely allowed to cross enemy lines, and that's where I always believed that fell on the news editors and producers to pull my work from my little glimpse of the conflict and put that together with the other sides that were coming in. Because the battlefield looks very different in conflict. Like the difference in 2 to 3 kilometers or 4, 5, 6, 10 miles is the difference in being there and not. And in different areas of a country can look very different. And so I can't be everywhere. I could only do the best, most accurate, ethical job with what was right in front of me.
Yeah, the reason I had asked, and obviously you mentioned it, but you showed me some pictures of you holding an RPG, and I would like some history, but like some context for there and what it was like to actually shoot one of those.
Sure. Came out of Kandahar, Afghanistan, in late 2001. So there were some local fighters there that me and a couple other journalists had become pretty good friends with, and we would go by the police station and talk to the police chief, and he knew that we had grown pretty fond of shooting these RPGs just for fun. We'd like have a picnic with these fighters, and they'd be like, "Here, you want to shoot this?" We're like, "Yeah, of course, we want to shoot this. You kidding me? Who doesn't like firepower?" So we'd go by the police station, and he'd be like, "Yeah, all the boys want to have a picnic." Like, "Yep, we'll have a picnic." And then they would show up with all these RPGs, and we would just sit up in the mountains outside Kandahar and shoot the side of the mountain with RPGs.
But what is the food of choice for an RPG picnic?
That would be a local lamb. We would literally send one of the boys to the market. We'd buy lamb and a bunch of rice. You have kebabs and rice.
That's so cool. I can only imagine what that's like. Was there anything you may have learned, either like literally learned or introspectively learned in your time in the Middle East as a photographer?
I think, I learned a lot about, who I am, and to go through 18 months of that type of work combined, through 3 trips to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq, and Iran, Jordan, Pakistan, all that region. I've spent a little over 18 months combined there. And to go through some stressful situations like that, you kind of learn what you're made of. You see a lot of good in people, you see a lot of bad in people, and I think all of that is very interwoven in the fabric of who I am today.
I mean, yeah, I could tell by just talking to you, which is, it's cool to be able to see how, or at least understand how someone is built by their own experiences. With that being said, one of the last things I want to mention before we start kind of closing it out, because we're trying to aim for the hour and a half, hour 45. You mentioned that you were within 22 hours of the towers falling, you were on the ground. Can you explain what it felt like, what you saw, and just like the I don't even know how I could frame the question, but I know you know where I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, for sure. So it still gives me chills thinking about it, because it was so shocking to like pack up. We had to drive to New York. I drove up with a team of photographers and reporters, and rolling into Manhattan. I'll never forget it. It's like dark and just this huge plume of smoke over Ground Zero. And like I watched the planes hit the towers on TV. I immediately called the office and said, I don't know what we're doing, but I want to go. They said, yeah, pack your stuff. We don't know how we're getting there yet, but be ready to go. And
You think you had prepared yourself for what you were going to see, or were you trying to?
You know, I thought I had, because I'd covered natural disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, prior to that. But like nothing, like even early on, like I went to Oklahoma for the Oklahoma City bombing.
Okay.
So I'd seen what I thought was destruction. Nothing compared. It was even when I'd seen it on TV, the towers falling, and replayed it in my head, you know, for a day driving up there. It was like to actually get there, Ground Zero, see it, smell it, taste it.
Sense of scale.
Oh my God, it's unreal. Yeah.
How long were you at shooting that and stuff like that?
I spent 2 weeks.
Yeah, okay, you mentioned this.
Yeah, in New York covering that, and then I got rotated out. Other photographers came in and drove back to Texas.
Wow.
Just like still trying to process what we had seen and witnessed. And all of that, it totally pales in comparison to, you know, I have very dear friends in the industry who they were there. They photographed the towers falling. They lived it live, and I didn't. I just photographed the aftermath.
I mean, I still think you're within one day. I mean, first responders still doing their thing. Like, you're pretty much in the middle of it. And not saying that you were there when it happened, but damn near.
Yeah, it was, you know, as close as I could have been.
Do you think that some of the reporting you did in during 9/11 actually gave you like validity to go over in the Middle East, or aside from having the vouch from your mentor?
Maybe, you know, we'd probably have to ask the editors at the time about that. But the body of work that I had produced in my career up to that point, I was still, I guess I'd been full time in the industry like 5 years at that time, 4 years maybe. So I was still a young photographer, but very eager, and yeah, obviously they saw something and knew that I could do it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no mystery to that. Now, one of the things I want to ask is, looking at your body work as a whole, is there any images that may have made, you know, global awareness that people may have seen that didn't know that was you that took them?
Yeah, there's a few. For years, I had like covered a lot of politics as well, and I was during Trump's first run for president. Was covering a campaign event, and there were a couple of photos out of that had absolutely gone viral. And at the time, for years, they were the most sold photo of Trump.
Wow.
At Getty Images.
No kidding.
I feel very confident that's long since changed, because those were shot years ago when there's been some pretty significant events.
I'm thinking of one right now
with him since. So yeah, it's just it was a photo of him at the podium just shrugging. I knew when I shot it, I was like, oh man, that's the kind of expression that it could go either way. And it ran with stories for years of him. Good and bad. So, and I've had a lot of photos that have gotten recognition.
Yeah, I mean,
over the years. I've had some football photos that have There's some stuff of Brady out there that it's pretty recognizable of him post game in the scrum after the Super Bowls. There was a photo that I won a Pro Football Hall of Fame photo contest one year with, and I actually thought it was a joke when they called me to tell me I'd won. I was just like, hey, but you never know what kind of photo people will like. Even when you think you know, you don't always know.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. And that's one of the things that I mentioned earlier. It's hard to look at an image now that you're someone, obviously you so well established on the inside, seeing, well, this image is so much more difficult to pull off. And then you have like the mass consensus of what social media would deem to be a good image. And it's kind of hard to compete. Now, one of the questions I have is, do you think, and I'll start to taper it off towards social media, I think, but do you think that that social media is an inert good, or do you think that it's a double-edged sword, or do you think it's an inert bad for pretty much every industry?
I think there's good and bad with it. I think a lot of it's how it's used. As someone who started my photographic career back when the news cycle moved much slower. You had weekly news magazines and you had a weekly sport magazine, SI, Sports Illustrated, which doesn't exist anymore. All of those magazines, they were the pinnacle of the industry. And those images that were published there, they lived for a week before the next issue was published. And then now that the web exists and social media, like, you're lucky to get somebody to look at a killer video clip for 5 seconds. It moves so fast. I see the rate that my 13-year-old son consumes imagery, and like the image doesn't last long at all anymore. Yeah,
it's hard to have an impactful image. Is there a picture that you can think of that maybe you may have not taken, but that has impacted you maybe through the fishing industry in the last like year or so, 2 years? I don't know. I feel like some people may have like oh, I saw this one picture, whatever. Maybe maybe you can think of one. If not, we can just keep going.
Not so much a still image, other than the stuff that JC and his crew are doing. Those guys.
Leo's on it too.
Oh my God. What they're doing it's the real deal. But like more so video. There's some video clips out there that are just mind-boggling. The tarpon stuff out of Florida. It's absolutely. I'm in awe with that because we don't have a lot of fish that jump. Here in Texas, we do have a few, but we keep some of that on the down low. But some of the stuff Pete's doing, Skiff Wonder, that dude, what he's doing video, awesome. Unbelievable, and a great human being too.
Don't disagree at all.
So I just, there's stuff he's producing that's killer, and there's plenty of others, but you can tell. I try not to like compare the work we're doing in Texas to what guys are doing that fish hard bottom and crystal clear gin water in the Caribbean. Because like, you put any of us in those situations and we'll shoot some marine imagery in video. But I know what kind of dirty water we deal with here.
True. Did you see Leo's new spread that he put out a couple days ago, 2 days ago, 3 days ago?
Yeah.
It was I like it.
It's ridiculous.
Now, one question. One of the things that I can appreciate that entire spread, but one of the things I don't like a lot, and this is not just the way he did his spread, it's just in general, I feel like a lot of people have been going towards the images that can be seen on 2 slides.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
You can look at my feed and probably see how I feel about it. I think a lot of it is really slick looking. It's just not how I choose to present my work. Like, kind of the extent of what I'll do, I'll post a horizontal video vertically, so you have to turn your phone, but you can see it larger.
Yeah.
I think the layouts look incredibly slick. Honestly, I look at it a lot of times and I just think, God, after getting off the water and having to prep the boat for clients the next day, and I wish I had that much time to pour over imagery. But but I just don't.
Yeah.
And so I still post single or multiple photos, but not the slick layout.
I think that the layout is really cool, but one of the things that kind of is weird to me is like when I go to share the image, and it'll be like, let's say, like for example, I think the guys No Omen Boundaries, they did a really cool spread, and I was gonna repost it, and like I went to go do it, and like half of the eye was in the middle of the image,
right.
and so or in the middle of the two slides. So it was like, well, I don't know what side to. I just don't repost it. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's one of those things where it's like if you're in the industry, it's like, oh, that's slick. But if you're looking at it from a consumer standpoint, it's like, well, which one do I share?
Right, because they don't have it set up now where it shares the whole package.
Exactly.
A 3 or 4 page package, but maybe they will eventually.
Now, with that being said, now we mentioned formats and slides and stuff like that. I would like to, before we start to close it out, you've been able to see the book. I would like your honest opinion on the things that I was able to show you. Granted, it wasn't the printed out version; it was on the laptop. But I really would like your thoughts on the project in and of itself.
I think it's gorgeous. I can't wait to see the printed book.
Me too. It comes in tomorrow.
I'm kind of old school that way, where I like a hardbound photo book. You saw in my office, I have an entire bookcase full of photo books, and that is just a fraction of the collection I had. I just had to scale it down. I used to have a much larger office, so I kind of had to scale down my photo book collection. But I love seeing killer imagery in print, and that book is full of it. It's very well done.
I'm glad you think that. It means a lot coming from you. With that being said, I think that we could start to close it out. And so before I do that, and I mentioned I was going to ask this, and you mentioned that you don't really want to over exacerbate some of the details, but throughout all the time that you spent, again, putting yourself on the line to essentially showcase combat, the war and stuff like that, is there any moment that sticks out to you where you personally may have regretted pushing it that far, or for a split second wondered if you did push it too far?
Yeah, there's probably a whole laundry list of times where you just think, oh, we pushed a little too hard. Fortunately, I never had a translator or a driver or anyone get injured or killed while we were working. That was something I was always really proud of. But maybe I didn't respond the way I should have to some people. I remember getting in a scuffle with a coworker in the middle of the street in Kandahar one time because he was talking a little stern and disrespectful to my translator, and I did not tolerate that one bit, and he realized it real quick. We're still great friends and joke about it, this colleague, but at the time, I probably shouldn't have lost my cool the way I did.
Yeah.
But it's all good.
Okay. Well, with that being said, to start closing it out, I always ask two final questions, and if I think of another one, we'll throw it in at the end. But the first question being is that looking at, and just kind of semi went into the last question, but looking at your entire career as a whole, from photography to fishing to pretty much everything you've done since the moment you stepped outside to the moment you find yourself now, is there anything that you wish you had done differently, or maybe moments that you regret in one way or another, or maybe moments that we already talked about moments that you're extremely proud of? So just, I guess, like moments that I guess you wish you would have done differently.
Yeah, like I said, a whole laundry list of experiences and interactions, and I try not to dwell on any of that, because I believe deeply that our whole process and ebb and flow in life, all of those experiences and how we act and react to them create who we are. And I just try to strive to be a better person every day. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. So I don't know. I probably should have been way nicer to some people along the way. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all have emotions, but we all breathe the same air. We all bleed red. We're still just people. And it probably would have served me well to be a little more patient sometimes. But like I said, we have to look forward and grow from that. And those experiences create who we are as people.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. And it's a good way to look at it. Now, the last question I like to ask, and so with you, I can imagine, or I would want you to kind of imagine like you're talking to your own son here, but advice for the next generation of the industry, either in photography or in fishing or anything in between. What would you kind of give them in terms of like advice to succeed or advice to find like gratitude or happiness within the industry?
Yeah. I would encourage anyone to go after it and do it. The photo industry is extremely saturated. A lot of people argue the guide industry is extremely saturated, more than ever. But there will always be room for people who are doing it at an elite level and want to succeed. They will succeed. Like even when I was in college in the mid-'90s, there were people who told me and fellow classmates, don't do this. Don't get in the industry. The industry is dying. And we were just like, no, we're gonna do this. And we did. And I still have a very dear friend of mine who's still working in the industry. He and I went through our entire college experience together and had worked as competitors all of my career. And you know what? We made it. Like, we did it. And I think there's always room for elite performance in any industry, in any realm. And if young guys want to go fish and be on the water every day, go do it. No. I would encourage them to try to understand the business side of it, that, in the photo realm, like, don't give your stuff away.
Yeah.
That hurts everyone who's trying to make money doing it.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you at all. And I think we kind of touched up on that in the social media aspect. Now, right before we close it off, I have one last question, and it's, if you had to print one picture of your entire career, it was the last picture that you'd ever be able to print, what would you print?
Oh, it would be a photograph of a coworker's. I'm terrible about like wanting to print and hang my own work in my house.
Really?
I just don't like doing it. That being said, there are a couple frames that I have downstairs in my office, but they're not like, I don't wake up every day and walk by and say, oh yeah, I love having that hanging there. Really what passed through my mind is like, yeah, we need to get a different piece of art and rotate that out. So I don't know. I've never been one to want to print and hang my own work.
Really?
Yeah. It's just, I love celebrating other people's work.
Okay. Yeah. I can see that. So, one of the things I wanted to mention real quick is that you're one of the few people who actually has a credential pass in Afghanistan, right? For photography? Or what is it? Or Pakistan?
Iran.
Iran?
Yeah,
oh, my bad.
When we arranged to get transferred into northern Iraq, we went through Tehran. So I still, it's obviously not valid anymore.
I know, but
I have an Iranian press card, which is a very unusual thing for an American citizen to have.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Well, with that being said, is there anything else that you wish you would have said or want to say before we get off there?
Oh man, I think you covered it. I appreciate you having me here. It's a real honor.
Cool, man. I'm glad that we were able to do this, man. With that being said, like, I was interested to see where I was going to take this conversation, and I think we covered a lot of really, really cool stuff. And I'm really glad that Chris had mentioned your name to me, because if not, I feel like I would have, quite literally, like we mentioned earlier, would have gone over and never seen this side of, or like the photography side of who you were and how you became who you are, which is in and of itself unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much ready to rock and roll.
Appreciate it.
Cool. Let's get out of here.